The year was 1868, and the frontier was a cruel and unrelenting place. Beneath the endless stretch of sky, a lone figure trudged through the dry, brittle grass, her breath shallow, her steps faltering. Helena Blackstone had seen many hardships in her 50 years, but none quite like this. She had always believed she was a survivor, a wife, a mother, a woman who had endured the death of her children, one by one, lost to fever, to the unforgiving winters, to the relentless march of fate. When her husband Richard had fallen to an outlaw's bullet, she had mourned but pressed on, clinging to the last semblance of purpose in a land that respected neither age nor grief. The settlers had taken her in then, if only out of practicality. A pair of hands, even aged ones, could still be useful on the long journey westward, but now that usefulness had worn thin. The wind whispered through the sparse trees, carrying with it the muted murmurs of the camp. Helena sat apart, her back against a gnarled cottonwood, listening, though she did not need to hear the words to know their meaning. The looks, the wary glances, the dwindling rations. She had seen it coming. Samuel Pike stood with the others, his weathered face turned toward the fire. A man who saw the world in simple terms, what could be used and what could be left behind. He was not cruel, not in the way of outlaws or the soldiers who burned Comanche villages to the ground, but his kindness was the kind that had limits, and Helena had reached them. "We can't carry dead weight," Pike said, his voice low but firm. "She's not dead weight," came a hesitant reply. Young Thomas, perhaps, one of the few who still met her eyes when he spoke to her. "She can't keep up." Pike's voice did not waver. "She can't shoot, she can't ride well enough to flee if we're set upon. We don't have enough supplies to spare." Silence followed, the kind of silence that sealed fates. Helena forced herself to rise, her body aching with the effort. She had always known she was not truly one of them. Richard had been the one they respected, the one with the rifle, the strength, the plans. Without him, she was just another mouth to feed, another body slowing them down. She stepped toward the fire, and the men fell silent. She was grateful for that, at least. No pretense, no false sympathy. "I understand," she said, her voice. Even no one spoke. She looked at them, these men and women who had once been her lifeline, and saw only relief in their faces. Not grief, not regret, just relief that she had made it easier for them. Pike nodded. "We leave at first light." There was nothing more to say. She did not sleep that night. Morning came, and with it the departure. Helena stood by as the settlers packed their wagons, cinched their saddles, prepared for the journey that she would not be a part of. She had been given a canteen of water, a small knife, and nothing else. Not even the old mare she had ridden on this long journey. That, too, was deemed a resource too valuable to waste. She watched as the last wagon rolled forward, the dust rising in its wake. Not a single person turned back. And then she was alone. The silence pressed in around her, heavier than she had anticipated. For weeks she had lived by the sounds of the group, the murmured conversations, the creak of wagon wheels, the snorting of horses. Now there was only the wind, the rustling of dry grass, the distant cry of a hawk. She sat, staring. At the ground, at the boot prints fading beneath the shifting dust. She should move. She should find shelter, water, something. But for long minutes she did nothing. When she finally forced herself to stand, the weight of her solitude settled into her bones. She walked east first, back the way they had come, but after an hour she realized the futility of it. There was no going back, not to civilization, not to safety. The nearest town was days away, and she had neither horse nor provisions to make the journey. South, then. The land was harsh, but she had heard there was water somewhere in that direction. If she could find a stream, she might last another day, maybe two. The sun climbed higher and her steps grew slower. Her throat burned, her breath coming in short, labored bursts. She had never been a strong woman. Richard had always told her she was delicate, made for softer things. She had believed him, but now she had no choice but to be something else. By midday, she had finished half her water. She forced herself to ration the rest, but the heat pressed against her, relentless, uncaring. Her skin burned beneath its gaze, her bonnet doing little to protect her. The first time she stumbled, she caught herself. The second time, She did. Not. She lay there, panting, the dust clinging to her skin. This was it, then. She closed her eyes. The sound of hooves came first, distant, rhythmic. She forced herself to open her eyes, but the glare of the sun blurred everything into shadow and light. A figure on horseback. She blinked. Maybe it was a mirage. The rider came closer. The shape solidified. A man, lean and powerful, his dark hair loose around his shoulders, his face unreadable. His horse moved with effortless grace, the kind of control that came from a lifetime in the saddle, a Comanche. Fear sparked in Helena's chest, but it was distant, dulled by exhaustion. He was young, no more than 35, she guessed, but there was something in his gaze that felt older. A warrior's eyes. She tried to move, to scramble backward, but her limbs refused to obey. He studied her, his expression giving nothing. Away. Then, without a word, he dismounted. She tensed, but he did not reach for a weapon. Instead, he crouched beside her, fingers brushing against the canteen at her side. He lifted it, checking its weight, then set it down again. His gaze returned to her face, assessing, measuring. She had heard stories of Comanche warriors, how they raided settlements, took captives. She knew what could happen to a woman alone in the wilderness. "Please," she whispered, though she did not know what she was begging for. The warrior did not reply. Instead, he stood, grabbed her arm, and hauled her to her feet, as if she weighed nothing. Her legs buckled, but he held her steady. For a long moment they simply stood there, the wind stirring the dust between them. Then, without ceremony, he lifted her onto his horse, swung up behind her, and turned the animal westward. Helena closed her eyes. She had been left to die. But death, it seemed, was not yet ready for her. Helena Blackstone awoke to the scent of smoke and the rhythmic sounds of horses moving in the distance. The air was thick with the scent of tanned leather, earth, and something faintly metallic. Blood, perhaps. Her body ached from the jarring ride, her head pounding as she forced her eyes open. Above her, the sky had softened into evening hues, a blend of deep orange and purple stretching across the horizon. She was lying on a blanket of rough animal hide, its texture unfamiliar against her skin. The camp around her was alive with quiet movement, men tending to their horses, women crouched over fire pits, voices carrying in a language she did not understand. Helena pushed herself up on her elbows, a spike of pain shooting through her shoulders. A shadow moved nearby, and she turned her head sharply. The warrior who had taken her sat a few feet away, sharpening the blade of a long knife with slow, deliberate strokes. The firelight cast flickering shadows over his face, highlighting the strong angles of his jaw and the unreadable depth of his dark eyes. He had not bound her hands. A small mercy. She swallowed, her throat raw. "Where am I?" The warrior did not look up. He continued sharpening his blade, the rhythmic scrape of stone against metal filling the silence between them. Helena licked her cracked lips, her mind spinning. "You understand me, don't you?" she pressed, her voice hoarse. This time, he glanced at her, his expression unreadable. Then, after a long pause, he spoke. "You are in my camp." His English was accented but clear. Helena's breath caught. He had understood her all along. She sat up fully now, wincing at the stiffness in her limbs. The world around her still felt surreal, as though she had stepped into a story told around a settler's fire, tales of warriors who stole women, of savagery and bloodshed. But there was no cruelty in his gaze, no immediate danger she could discern. The warrior she now realized was her captor studied her for a moment before returning to his blade. "Oh, you were dying," he said simply. Helena pressed a hand to her forehead, trying to will herself into clarity. "You saved me." A slight nod. Nothing more. She exhaled sharply, her breath unsteady. "Why?" The warrior stopped sharpening. The knife. His dark eyes flickered over her, assessing. "Would you rather be dead?" The question landed heavy between them. Helena swallowed hard, memories of the wasteland flashing through her mind, the unyielding heat, the thirst, the utter certainty that she had been walking to her grave. She had already felt death's presence, and she had been ready to accept it, but she was still here. She turned her gaze toward the camp. Other Comanche sat in small clusters, tending to tasks with an easy familiarity. their voices weaving together like the rise and fall of wind. A woman passed nearby, glancing at Helena with unreadable eyes before moving on. "Are you going to kill me?" she asked at last. The warrior's lip twitched, whether in amusement or something else she could not tell. "If I wanted you dead, you would not be sitting here." It wasn't a reassurance, but it wasn't a threat either. She wrapped her arms around herself, willing the shivers of exhaustion from her bones. "What's your name?" For a moment, he didn't answer. Then, as though deciding something, he said, "Talon." Helena let the name settle on her tongue. Short, strong. It suited him. She took a slow breath, steadying herself. "What are you going to do with me?" Talon sheathed his knife. "That is not for me to decide." A cold weight settled in her stomach. She wasn't a prisoner of just one man. She was at the mercy of an entire camp. A wave of noise rose as another group of warriors returned, riding in with the easy confidence of men who belonged to the land more than the land belonged to them. Talon rose as an older man approached, his presence commanding. He spoke in their language, his voice low and measured, and though Helena could not understand the words, she understood their weight. Talon responded, his tone calm but firm. A few others gathered, listening. Helena forced herself to remain still, her heart hammering as she saw some of them glance in her direction. She had seen such looks before, the kind men gave when deciding what to do with something of little value. A woman's voice cut through the air. Helena turned to see a figure step forward, an older woman, perhaps near Helena's own age, her expression unreadable. She spoke sharply, gesturing toward Helena, and the conversation shifted, the tension subtly easing. Talon inclined his head in response. The older woman then turned her gaze to Helena, sharp and measuring. After a moment, she approached. "You." "We'll come," she said, her accent thick but her English clear. Helena hesitated, then pushed herself to her feet. The older woman, who Helena realized was no mere bystander, studied her before nodding toward one of the larger fires. Helena followed, her body aching with every step. As they sat, the woman handed Helena a wooden bowl filled with something thick and steaming. "Eat." Helena looked at the food, some sort of stew. Its scent earthy and unfamiliar. Her stomach twisted in protest, but hunger won over caution. She lifted the bowl to her lips, tasting the rich broth, the tender bits of meat, and root vegetables. The woman watched her for a long moment before speaking. "You are his now." Helena choked on the broth, coughing hard. She wiped her mouth, her pulse thrumming in her ears. "What?" The woman's expression remained steady. "Talon saved your life. That means he is responsible for you. You are his woman now." A cold sensation crawled up Helena's spine. She set the bowl down, her fingers tightening. "I didn't ask for that." The woman shrugged, unbothered. "Ask or not, it is done." Helena shook her head. "That's not how—" But she stopped herself. What argument could she make? This was not the world of the settlers, of churches and marriage certificates and quiet, bitter negotiations between men. This was something else entirely. She turned her gaze toward Talon, who stood at the edge of the firelight, speaking to the others, his expression impassive. He did not look at her. A strange sensation coiled in Helena's chest, something between fear and resignation. She had been left for dead. Now she had been claimed by a man who had no reason to keep her alive, except that he had chosen to. What? That choice meant she did not yet understand. The woman beside her watched her carefully. "You will learn," she said at last. And there was something in her tone, not kindness, not cruelty, but certainty. Helena met her gaze and, for the first time since waking in this strange place, understood that she had been given something unexpected. A second chance. What she did with it was yet to be seen. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and the lingering smoke from the dying embers of last night's fire. Helena stirred beneath the thick buffalo hide that had been given to her, the unfamiliar weight both a comfort and a reminder of where she was. She had spent her first full night in the Comanche camp, neither bound nor caged, but far from free. The sky above was still streaked with dawn's first light when she forced herself up, wincing at the stiffness in her limbs. The world here did not wait for anyone to gather themselves. Around her, the camp was already alive. Warriors prepared for the hunt, their movements swift and assured. Women gathered near the fires, speaking in their rolling, rhythmic tongue, some laughing, others working in silence. Children darted between tents, their joy an odd contrast to the hardness of this life. No one paid her much mind, though she felt their eyes when they thought she wasn't looking. Talon stood near the horses, speaking in low tones with another man. His posture was as unreadable as ever, but there was no mistaking the authority in his stance. He was not just another warrior. He was something more. He had claimed responsibility for her, yet beyond that, he had said little to her since their arrival. Helena swallowed the unease that tightened her throat. She had spent her entire life knowing her place in the world, first as a daughter, then as a wife. Even after Richard's death, she had understood her role among the settlers. But here, she was something undefined. She could not go back to the life she knew. But she could not yet see what shape this new life would take. She forced herself to stand and move toward the fire, her stomach hollow with hunger. The older woman, Red Moon, as she had been called, glanced at her, then gestured toward a bowl. Helena hesitated only a moment before accepting it. She had learned enough in her years to know that refusing food was not just foolish but disrespectful. She ate in silence, the broth warm and rich, filling the empty spaces inside her. Red Moon watched her with sharp eyes. "You will work today." Helena swallowed her mouthful carefully. "Work?" Red Moon tilted her head slightly. "Do you think you will sit and do nothing?" Helena stiffened. "I don't expect to sit, but I don't know what you expect of me." Red Moon considered her. "You are not a warrior, you do not hunt, but you can learn other things." She gestured toward the group of women near the fires. "Come." Helena hesitated, then followed. The morning passed in a blur of unfamiliar tasks. She was given roots to grind, pelts to soften, food to prepare. Her hands, once accustomed to sewing and tending a garden, fumbled with the unfamiliar work. The other women did not mock her, but neither did they make it easy. She was expected to learn by watching, by trying, by failing and trying again. Midday, sweat clung to the back of her neck. Her arms ached and her fingers were raw, and yet something inside her had settled. The work, however foreign, was grounding. For the first time since being left to die, she felt something close to purpose. She paused to wipe her brow when she sensed someone watching her. She turned, to find Talon standing a short distance away, his expression unreadable as always. "You work," he observed. Helena straightened. "I survive." A flicker of something crossed his face. Approval, perhaps. "Good." He turned away, as if that was all he had wanted to see. Something inside Helena bristled. She was not a child needing praise, but she also understood that in this place respect was earned, not given. She had no illusions about what she was to them, a burden, a strange thing that did not yet belong. But she could not afford to be useless. The afternoon sun burned high when the men returned, carrying the spoils of their hunt. The camp came alive with movement, the rhythm of survival taking over. Helena watched as the warriors dismounted, as the women moved to meet them, as the world seemed to shift seamlessly into motion. Talon approached, carrying something wrapped in cloth. He stopped before her, his dark eyes steady. "For you." Helena frowned, glancing down at the bundle he extended. Slowly she took it and unwrapped the cloth, revealing a small knife with a bone handle. It was simple but well made, the blade sharp and clean. She looked up at him, confused. "Why?" Talon shrugged. "You should not be defenseless." The weight of it in her hand felt heavier than it should. She swallowed, curling her fingers around the handle. She was not sure if this was a gift or a test. Perhaps it was both. That night, as the fires burned low, Helena sat near the edge of the camp, the knife resting in her lap. She traced the ridges of the handle with her fingers, her mind restless. She was not foolish. This life was not kind to women who did not have a place. She could not be a warrior, but she could make herself useful. She could become something more than a settler abandoned to the wild. A rustling nearby made her look up. Talon stood a few feet away, watching her in that quiet way of his. "You are thinking," he said. Helena let out a breath. "I do that, often." A small, almost amused glint touched his eyes. "You are different from the women here." She lifted the knife slightly. "And yet here I am." Talon nodded as if that answered something for him. He stepped closer, his gaze unreadable. "You do not fear me." Helena met his gaze, holding steady. "Should I?" For the first time, something close to a smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "No." The moment stretched between them, neither speaking, neither looking away. Then, with the ease of someone who had already made his decision, Talon stepped back. "Sleep," he said simply. "Tomorrow, you learn more." Helena watched him go, her fingers tightening around the knife. She was still learning what she was in this place, but one thing was certain: she was not done yet. The first sign of trouble was the horses. They shifted uneasily, their ears flicking back, nostrils flaring at something unseen beyond the tree line. Helena had learned to trust their instincts. Animals sensed danger before humans did. She glanced toward the warriors sharpening arrows. Near the fire, their movement slowing as they too noticed the shift in the air. A storm was coming, not of wind and rain, but of blood and reckoning. Talon appeared beside her, his presence as steady as the earth beneath her feet. He had always moved like the land itself, like he belonged to it, in a way no settler ever could. His eyes swept the horizon, narrowing at the shifting shadows between the trees. "They are close," he murmured. A cold knot of understanding tightened in Helena's stomach. The settlers had come. She had always known it was possible. A lone woman disappearing into Comanche lands was an easy thing to forget, but the memory of her abandonment might still linger in those who had left her behind. And now, perhaps they had come to finish what they had started. Talon's expression was unreadable, but she sensed the calculation in his gaze. His people were not unprepared, but this was not a battle they had sought. "They will not leave without a fight," he said. Helena's hands curled into fists at her sides. Once, she might have prayed for this moment, for the sight of Samuel, Pike and his men, for the chance to stand among her own kind again. But she was no longer certain who her kind were. The distant snap of a branch sent tension coiling through the camp. Shadows shifted, revealing figures emerging from the trees. The settlers came on horseback, rifles slung over their shoulders, their faces hard with determination. Pike rode at the front, his sharp gaze scanning the camp with a mixture of triumph and revulsion. Helena stepped forward before she could stop herself. Pike's eyes landed on her, widening in something like disbelief. "God above," he muttered, shaking his head. "I'd heard rumors, but I didn't believe it." His gaze swept over her, taking in the buckskin she now wore, the knife strapped at her waist, the way she stood beside Talon rather than behind him. "Look at you, living like an animal." Anger surged through Helena's veins, hot and undeniable. "You left me to die," she said, her voice steady. Pike's mouth pressed into a thin line. "We did what we had to do." A murmur rose from the warriors behind her. Talon remained, silent, his hand resting lightly on the hilt of his knife, but Helena could feel the tension rolling off him in waves. He was waiting for her, she realized, waiting to see what she would do. She took another step forward, meeting Pike's gaze. "And now," she demanded, "you've come to fix your mistake, or just bury it?" Pike exhaled sharply, as if speaking to her was an irritation he hadn't anticipated. "We came to bring you back," she laughed, then sharp and bitter. "Back to what?" "To civilization," he snapped. "To your people." Helena's fingers flexed around the handle of her knife. "These are my people." A flicker of unease passed through Pike's face, but he masked it quickly, straightening in his saddle. "I don't mean that. You've been taken. You've been turned." "Turned?" The word tasted like iron on her tongue. "You left me to rot in the dirt, and now you think you get to decide where I belong." His hand drifted toward his rifle. "Don't do this, Helena." The warning was clear. Helena had seen men like Pike her entire life, men who believed the world turned by their hands alone. that women like her were meant to be silent, obedient, grateful. She had been all of those things once. She wasn't anymore. Slowly, deliberately, she reached for the knife at her waist and pulled it free. Pike's expression darkened. "You're making a mistake." She took another step forward. "No," she said, "I'm making a choice." And then the first shot rang out. The crack of the rifle split the air, sending the camp into a flurry of motion. Warriors surged forward, arrows loosing, knives flashing in the firelight. Horses screamed as gunfire erupted, smoke curling into the evening sky. Helena didn't hesitate. She ducked low, moving toward the cover of the nearest shelter as bullets tore through the air. The settlers were outnumbered, but they had come armed, their rifles cutting down anything in their path. A figure lunged toward her, a man she recognized from the wagon train, his face twisted with fury. She moved before she could think, bringing the knife up just as he reached for her. The blade sank deep, hot blood spilling over her fingers. He staggered back, eyes wide, before crumpling to the ground. Her breath came hard and fast. There was no time to dwell on it. She turned just as another shot rang out, this one closer. Talon, he moved like a shadow, weaving through the chaos with a deadly precision. But he was outnumbered. She saw Pike raise his rifle, aiming squarely. Her talons back. Helena moved without thinking. She threw herself toward Pike, colliding with him just as he pulled the trigger. The shot went wide, missing Talon by inches. Pike swore, twisting beneath her, but she fought like an animal, clawing, striking. His fist caught her across the jaw, sending her sprawling into the dirt. But before he could rise, an arrow struck him in the chest. Talon stood a few feet away. Another arrow already notched, his eyes locked on her. The battle was over. The remaining settlers, those who had not been cut down, turned their horses and fled into the trees, their retreat swift and desperate. Helena sat up slowly, her body aching, her breath coming in short, uneven bursts. Pike's body lay still beside her, the life gone from his eyes. She exhaled sharply, her pulse thrumming with adrenaline. Talon approached, his gaze unreadable. He crouched before her, studying her as though seeing her for the first time. "You fought," she nodded, swallowing hard. "You killed." Another nod. He reached out, his fingers brushing over her bruised cheek, his touch feather-light. "And you did not run." She met his gaze, steady and unflinching. "No," she whispered. "I did not." A long silence stretched between them before he finally nodded. The fires burned low as the camp settled. The dead gathered, the wounded tended to. Helena sat near the edge of it all, watching, feeling the weight of the night settle into her bones. She had chosen this. She had stood her ground, and now there was no going back. Talon sat beside her, his presence quiet, solid. "You are not the woman they left behind," he said after a moment. Helena looked down at her hands, still stained with blood. She thought of the woman she had been, the one who had clung to the past, to the life she had lost. That woman was gone now. She lifted her gaze to his, something steady, something unshaken. "No," she agreed. "I am not." Talon studied her for a moment, then, without a word, handed her his knife. Helena took it without hesitation. The night stretched before them, long and dark. But she was not afraid. She was home.